and welcome to a new episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. I am your host, Katerina. Each week, we dive into a blend of topics that resonate with the soul. Whether you're an architect enthusiast, have a passion for Wanderlust, want to discover holistic approaches to rejuvenate your body and mind, or are intrigued to learn about Vastu Shastra with a modern approach, you've come to the right place. Join me as I sit down with inspiring, like-minded women from various walks of life. We will delve into their journeys to discuss the challenges and moments that define their paths. So sit back, relax, and let the spark of positive energy ignite your curiosity. Today, I am joined by Aya Schlachter, architect, mother, CEO, and founder of MGS Global Group, a drafting service that provides Revit, ArchiCAD, CAD drafting, and 3D rendering services for architecture and design firms. And she is also the host of Architect My Life podcast. Aya, welcome to From the Honeycomb podcast.
Thanks, Katerina. I'm excited to be here.
Excited to have you. And as you know, we begin every episode by sharing something that we are grateful for in the present moment. So, what are you grateful for?
I'm super grateful for all my relationships with my family, with my friends, my colleagues, my staff. People say that the biggest cause of stress and death is like being lonely. And so now I'm super grateful for the people that surround me and also the resources I have. I introduce people. I'm a connector, right? So I also, apart from my relationships, I'm happy that I'm able to share my connections to other people to uplift everyone's lives, especially during the holidays. I had a lot of guests that were, alone in the holidays. And I didn't realize that until my sister was, Aya, you really are a good human being. I'm like, why? A lot of these people didn't have family. And I brought them all together. And it was wonderful. So, yeah, I'm grateful for all my friends and people that are in my life.
Oh, I love that. No, that's so true. Finding that community and how powerful that can be. And you don't feel lonely. And I'm definitely sensing that, especially in through social media and like connecting with you, where we connected the mental health summit that Joanne put together, who she was a guest previously on the podcast. The sense of community and that understanding that people are going through what you're going through, or it's just you feel less alone.
Yeah, especially during the holidays, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, some people are lucky to have family and friends, but some people, the holidays are really bad for them. So, for some reason, I had all these people with no family or family were out of town, and we just had a wonderful time. And I'm Filipino, and we did karaoke and we're singing. I mean, that's a Filipino thing. We have like a karaoke at every party. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah,
That's
it was great.
awesome. Sounds like so much fun.
Yeah.
Tell us where your architecture background, why did you decide to become an architect and what has led you to what is your journey to today?
So, I wanted to be a fashion designer and
Okay.
just my dad was like, "You know what? I know you're creative, but just take up architecture cuz it's the foundation of all arts."
Hmm.
So I did. I was 16. I graduated high school at 16. So I
Wow.
didn't know I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just said, "Okay, dad." And I became, I went to school in NJIT and then I went for my master's in Columbia and that was it. And I kind of really liked architecture, but specifically urban design, which led me to Columbia University because my goal was to go back home to the Philippines and help with public housing and maybe create interventions for parks because where I'm from, it's very congested and it was not a design city. So I wanted to really uplift, the way of life for the people in the Philippines,
Mhm.
especially by proposing public parks and things like that. But when I met my boyfriend then and now husband, I'm like, I'm not going back to the Philippines. So I ended up here working for traditional firms. I
Mhm.
worked for three architecture firms, or four maybe, one in Connecticut and three in New York City. But I had a traumatic time, like a lot of architects, you burn out and like it's not any more balanced. So when I gave birth to my daughter, we got my husband and I, we got married. When I gave birth to my daughter, I decided just to stay home and like chill. But I knew I was going to start a business because I'm an entrepreneur by DNA. So I wanted to start a business, but I didn't know what. So when I gave birth to my daughter, I started doing the ARE exams.
Mhm. Wow.
But then, yeah, like studying here,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
not,
yeah.
maybe I waited 3 months, but I started the process. But
Wow.
then some of my former bosses and friends asked me if I was open to doing CDs and drafting. So I'm like, sure, why not? So I started drafting from my one bedroom apartment in Queens while breastfeeding my
Wow.
daughter.
Wow.
And then I got a big break with this company coach, the bag
Mhm.
stores. One of my friends worked there and he asked me to do some store design. And I said, sure. But
Nice.
it was so kind of very simple that I said, give me more work, give me more work. So they did.
Mm.
They just kept on giving me work. I hired my friends and my coworkers for nights and weekends work. So I started a drafting company in my studio apartment, or no, one bedroom in
Wow.
Queens. So that's how I started drafting. I got a big break by drafting for Coach. We did around so many stores for them.
Mhm.
And I still tried to get my exams. I've been still trying to get my exams, but right now we're a full-blown drafting company. So that
Nice.
it all started in my one bedroom apartment in Queens.
That's incredible because I
Yeah.
was looking at your website. You have quite a staff now.
We're up to 40,
You
I
did it.
think.
That's incredible. And to grow from just your one bedroom apartment to now having such a large staff, what was that growth like? Because did that come quickly? It seemed.
Actually, it was a blessing and a curse.
Mhm.
When your first client turns out to be like a major client, right?
Mhm.
The growth was easy. I had one client. It was amazing. We did so many jobs. When Coach, during the recession, we stopped the first recession in 2008. I stopped doing work for Coach
Mhm.
because no one was building. And then Michael Kors called me, and they asked me to do drafting, and I did. And so after 2008 recession, we started drafting. We started with 4 shops per month. At our peak, we were doing 100 stores per month. At
Wow.
that point, I already had like 10 employees. Again, it was a blessing, right? Because
Mhm.
everything is very automated. It's very systematic. When you're doing store design times, we've done around 4,000. So I say it as a blessing and a curse. A blessing because I had cash flow for 6 years.
Mhm.
But then I was living in the Philippines. Then I moved back home to start the business. But we moved back
Mhm.
to the States when I had my second son. I met my second child. But I didn't realize that, I was busy being mom. My kids were, I think, 6 and 4 when I moved back here. I was
Okay.
busy being mom. Everything was very automated. We had a system, but my husband, who was working with me in finance, was like, "Hey, Aya, did you realize that your pipeline is now down to 40 from 100?" Because
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't pay attention. He's like, "We can hardly support our staff." That's why I call it a
Mm.
curse too, because I got too comfortable with just 2 clients now in the retail space that I was blindsided. I was too busy focusing on my kids and setting up a new life here, which is also important. But as a business owner, you need to really think about marketing and branding yourself, because
Mhm.
what happens is when people only do branding and marketing when it's too late.
Mhm.
So that's what happened. So in 2016, with Amazon and all of the online shopping, I had to lay off like half of my staff, which was painful.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So we started again from scratch. I hired a business development consultant. I said, I need to make money fast because I can't pay my payroll and like my bills. And he looked at my website and he's like, you know what? Your website is full of pretty pictures, but I can't sell you. We got to start from scratch, rebranding, right?
Mm.
So we had to rebrand and then start again and diversify. So in 2016 and 17, we rebranded MG Schlock. It was MG Schlachter then,
Mhm.
and then a lot of marketing, digital marketing, and it was a rough period, but overall, with marketing and branding, it really helped with sustainable growth. So, I would my message for architects, don't rely on referral and organic growth. You need to really make sure your blind spots are covered, like with the current pandemic. I was able to still make it through, but it was not easy basically, especially for us architects who are not trained to run a business.
Absolutely. And I resonate so much with what you've said because now I know as of last year, I'm a business owner and my first few months were really great. I was getting referrals, and this is the first month now that I'm feeling a sense of like, okay, well, I've got some projects, but where are my next ones going to come from? And like you said, the marketing. And so that's what I'm working on in the background now is like You always have to be thinking as a business owner 10, 20 steps ahead because and you the problem is though you have to be thinking 10 steps, 20 steps ahead for a future that you don't know what's going to happen. Like who could have thought the pandemic would have happened? Who could have thought, Amazon would have taken over and you would have had less stores, to design. It's just you're constantly thinking of all these scenarios that will come up and how will your business evolve with whatever is thrown at you from multiple angles.
Yes, and also one of the things is being a business owner is long game. So for you as a young entrepreneur and new business owner, if you plant the seeds now, right,
Mhm.
in about 3 4 years, it will really just it'll flourish, right? What you're doing with the podcast, and I'm super impressed by everything you're doing
Oh,
because
thank
I'm
you.
also a podcaster and it's amazing you're over 100 episodes, but you're doing the right thing by planting the seeds. Now you will never know when your biggest client can come from, right? One
Mhm.
time I got asked to speak in the Philippines where I graduated. My high school asked me to speak in like career whatever, like they wanted to interview people with different backgrounds. I don't like going to my high school reunions because I was
Mhm.
so awkward in high school. Like I don't like, do you know what I
I
mean?
get it,
Like,
I get it. I have not gone to my high school reunion was supposed to happen in 2020, and thank
yeah.
God for the for the pandemic because we had no reunion.
So I went to the reunion, not the reunion, but I had to see old because I was so dorky in high school,
Mhm.
whatever. So I showed up and then I sat next to this lady who's a businesswoman now, and like we were chit chatting, and she's like, "Hey, what do you do?" I said, "I do architecture support. We're an architecture company." He's like, "Oh, I actually am building a mall in whatever in my province. Are you open to doing work in the Philippines?" And I'm like, "Sure," even though I'm not a licensed architect in the Philippines.
Mhm.
Anyway, long story short, I partnered up with an architect of record there. We built a huge lifestyle mall with like
Wow.
retail, commercial. It won here in Cleveland, AIA and the design awards. At It was huge. It was a huge project. That's because I showed up to my reunion.
Right.
Go to the church events, go to the fundraiser, go
Mhm.
to the hang out with the community. You'll never know who you'll find. Sometimes it's not transactional, like if I go to this networking event, who can I potentially meet? So I showed up, and then this huge mall is now, it's in Ormoc. It's this town, small city in outside the Philippines, but it won
Mhm.
the People's Choice Awards in Cleveland, AIA.
Wow.
So that's my point. Like, just show up. Don't expect, like, if you're super transactional and like you want to know, it's never gonna happen, right? It's like
Mhm.
that's the way I go through life. I go to events. Maybe I'll meet people, but maybe I'll meet good friends. Maybe I'll meet
Mhm.
clients, but maybe I can connect people to each other. So it's just widening the network and being, having a good, solid network around you.
No, absolutely. It is. It's so true. It's yes, going to networking events because I've seen those have been helpful and I'm part of local business clubs and that's been great. It's been helpful socially as well just to connect with other business owners. But I like that you said even going to your school event. You never know. Like yesterday I was at a we have Ganal Lumber, which is this it's like a Home Depot, but it's more specific for contractors. And we have one of those. And I was looking at some shingle samples and one of the guys was helping me and he brought in a forklift. I was looking at the samples and we were talking and I said, I'm an architect. He's like, oh, okay, that's amazing. So he's like, well, what are you thinking about for this project? We're talking about material, is it fire resistant, this material? We're going through everything. And so I thank him for helping me like look at the samples. And before I leave, he's like, actually, can I have your card? And I said, yeah, sure. And he goes, because my wife and I are thinking about designing a house in Hawaii. And I'm like, well, I'm in California, but Hawaii sounds amazing. And it's saying yes to all of these opportunities. And I like that you brought up also the international aspect of, you built a project in the Philippines, yet it won an award in Cleveland. And what I've noticed this past year is before I became my own business owner and had my own firm, I thought if I'm licensed in California, this is the only place I can practice architecture. This is the only place I'll be able to work. I can't, if I move, I'll have to start all over again. 50% of the projects or the referrals I get are from outside of California.
That's great.
I mean, there's a project potentially on the East Coast that I'm looking at in India. Like, there's and just being open to it. And I love that you're like, you said yes to the opportunity, even though you aren't licensed in the Philippines. You said, I'll find an architect of record. And that's also creating that community and creating that relationship. Now you have a contact in the Philippines, they have a contact in the United States. You can keep growing together. You don't know what other projects will, maybe they'll have someone reach out to them who wants to build something in the US and you can be part of that relationship. You just never know where work is going to come from and the relationships you're going to meet along the way.
100%. I really believe in that. And just show up, right? Like we
Right.
can't be super transactional. I go to this event called Independent Lodging Congress.
Mhm.
It's a hospitality event, and the founder, always says in the beginning, this event you're not allowed to pitch and no selling. He said, I know your boss has brought you here to make connections and to win whatever proposals, but in our congress, in our we build relationships so that maybe we'll want to work with you in the future. And I
Mm.
love that about that, no pitching and no selling. And it's great. I've
It
been able
is.
to get work even without pitching or selling because they just like me as a human being, right? You just kind of
Right.
like, you obviously want to work with people you like and you trust. So, yeah.
No, absolutely. And that there's so much that goes behind the personality of a person, and working
Yes,
with them speaks more for the longevity of your relationship and your professional relationship. Because if they have incredible work, but they're an asshole to work with, you're not going to work with them on another project. It
exactly.
doesn't matter. Your work speaks for itself in one way, but then your personality, your team, your professionalism, that's what's going to get you that next job.
Yeah, and also being authentic, that's a big one.
Hmm.
If you're yourself and authentic and you don't have a facade and you don't, it's easier for people to get to know you, right? I
Hmm.
mean, if you're fake and if you try to, I don't know if bullshit is the word, but if you try too hard, people
Yeah.
can see through that. So
Mhm.
it's good to just, like sometimes my Filipino accent comes out, my kids make fun of me, but my husband thinks it's cute, so whatever, right? And then I tried speaking with an American accent, and my kids are like, ew, mom, so I am who I am. When I
Yeah.
talk to Filipinos, I might have my slight Filipino accent, but whatever. It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. No, it's you, and it's
Yeah.
amazing, and I resonate too with what you're saying about being of mixed cultures. So, I was born in the Czech Republic, but then I've grown up in the United States, and so I understand what you're saying is even though I kind of have an accent, sometimes in Czech I'll notice it from English, but it's more of like the way my grammar is just off, or I'll say something because 'cause I'll translate it from English to Czech, and it won't
Right.
make sense, but it's just like, that's just who you are. And that brings another level of personality and makes you unique.
Yeah. And also that's how, the business grew. I'm gonna share with you.
Mhm.
Before, my business was called MG Schlachter,
Mhm.
and I never showed my face. My website didn't have my face because I was working with big clients. I didn't want people to know that the person running MG Schlachter was a tiny Filipina. I'm barely 5 feet,
Mm.
right? So I never put my face on the website, and people thought MG Schlachter was run by like an old Jewish white man, right?
Oh
It's
my gosh.
hilarious. And so when I went to coach, I mean to Michael Kors in New York City, I only work with 3 or 4 people in the team, the
Mhm.
architecture group. But when I went there, because I was one of their biggest suppliers of drafting and drawings, so everyone was making a big fuss. They're calling people, "Hey, MG Schachter's here." They called finance. They called everyone. They're all like, "We're in the 12th floor. MG Schachter's here." So all the guys came to see me. They're like, "Oh, you're MG Schachter." They were so surprised to see like a tiny Filipina. I'm like, yep, it's me. But I didn't want to show myself because I was insecure about my race, my gender, my everything. Because I didn't think that they would trust me because I was Filipina. But I
Mhm.
changed that. Now I started the architect my life. I'm the person behind MGS Global, but people are not bothered by it. So the company has grown ever since I started being front facing. So
Mhm.
there you go.
And when did that shift happen? When did you start putting your face on the website?
So my business development manager in 2016, when he said I can't work with you unless we start from scratch, he's like, how come your name is not there? How come you didn't put the fact that you went to Columbia University, that you went to
Mhm.
NJIT? Why are you hiding all of that? I said, well, we don't brag, we're Filipino. We don't like to brag about ourselves. And he's like, nope, let's change that. Take a cute photo of you, put the NGIT Columbia up front, and talk about your accomplishments. It was very uncomfortable. And I said, I'm so
Mhm.
insecure because I'm Filipina. It's like, get over it. And so that's when it started. Like I became front facing. And even my husband was like, Aya, you have nothing to worry about. It's actually good to be a minority female, minority owned business. So that in 2016, 17, that's when I started. We rebranded from MG Schlachter to MGS Global Group. So
Okay.
that's when it all started. So I think that, like what Joanne was saying, like
Mhm.
building a personal brand is really important because people will know the person behind the company.
Mhm.
So it's yeah. So that's when it happened. It took a while. Like it took maybe 2 to 3 years before I was comfortable being the ambassador for my company.
And that's the thing a lot of people don't realize is it's not overnight success. It does take a couple years. It takes hard work, it takes consistency, and, like, I have the 100 episodes plus on my podcast, and that's been very consistent, and it hasn't been until really the last few months that I've seen substantial growth in my numbers, in the guests I've been able to have on, and it's just showing up and being consistent, and it is putting that hard work in. And so that's a huge aspect of it. I wanna come back to one thing that you mentioned. It was kind of talking about, you have to put yourself out there, go to the meetings, go network, meet with people. Because another thing that a lot of, like young business owners think is you're going to get just this, like, it's just all going to come to you. It's going to be a passive flow of income of just, you're going to sit at your desk and the phone's going to start ringing. Like, no, that's not it at all. And you have to put yourself out there. And that's the one thing that I struggled with at the beginning is networking and putting myself out there because it was so new to me. But then I started to get better at it and better. And then I took a break, over the last few weeks, just over the holidays. And now I'm coming into the new year and I'm already networking. I'm presenting at a middle school and high school to talk about architecture. Same thought of you going to your high school, even though to meet with people, you just never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to network with. And it's being active, not being passive.
True. Just show up. I mean, plus you're providing value. When people invite, I used to say no to a lot of things because I was shy. But then my dad said, when people invite you, that means they want you there. You should be honored.
Mhm.
Go to as many events as you can because you're built. It's foundational, right? You'll never know when they'll need my business is B2B, so I work with architects. But if I were like a regular architect, I could meet like my kid's classmate and maybe their parents want to build a house in Hawaii, right? You
Yeah.
never know. So
No.
yeah, just try push yourself and get out of your comfort zone and just even if it's awkward, even if you're standing by yourself, it's okay. People
Mhm.
will talk to you. I
For
did that so
sure.
many times. I just hang out in the bar waiting, and at the end of the evening, I make connections, right? Yeah.
No, absolutely. Even if you don't wanna go, go, because there's been moments where I'm
Yeah.
like, "I don't wanna go," but then if I've at least given my business card out to one person, I see that as successful. That means
Yes.
I've connected with one person, regardless if I spent, just kinda standing in the corner waiting. As long as I gave at least one business card out or talked to someone, that was a successful evening. It was, but it's putting yourself out there, and I like your message, just you have to go for it. You have to go for it,
Yes.
and it's scary because being an entrepreneur is a roller coaster of emotions from the day to day to your journey of, you were killing it, you had a huge team, and then something completely out of your control affected all of a sudden your day to day business. And so, moving through those challenging times, what is your kind of advice? I know there's talks of, are we in a recession, not in a recession? And I can't quite get the right answer from anybody, but because, for example, where I live, we're still building. People are still signing up.
You're in California, right? Where are you?
Yeah, Orange
Yeah.
County.
Oh
And
wow.
so we're also there. I'm working a coastal town, Laguna Beach. It's a little bit of a bubble. So a lot of the economic changes that happen throughout the country don't always affect us. So I know I'm still signing up projects, even though I know I saw AIA, they mentioned that the number of contracts being signed in this last two quarters of 2023 went down compared to the first two quarters. So my question for you is, someone, a new business owner is going through, like for me, you're going through a challenging times, or you're thinking you may be facing a challenging time. What is your advice?
I think you should prepare for it financially because everything is financial, right? Obviously, mental health is important, but you need to have a nest egg. Like if you're profitable right now, make sure you set aside money in a separate account, because you don't want to be, having no money is stress if you can't pay your bills, right?
Right.
Or your car or whatever. So prepare, like if when you're making a lot, make sure you put some away, like be disciplined when you do that. But also, one of the things I tell a lot of entrepreneurs is you should apply for a line of credit. I don't know if you've gotten that far, but when you apply for a line of credit, I think they will give you 10% of your gross sales. So if you're making 250 a year, then the banks will loan you 25,000 or something like that. So at least, I mean, with, it can just sit there for a rainy day, but
Mm-hmm.
don't wait to get a line of credit when you have no income. So if you know that you have 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 of sales, go to the bank right now and say, "Hey, I would like to apply for a line of credit." And then they'll ask for your financials and give you 10%, I think, and
Okay.
then have that nest egg. That's what I did before the pandemic. Every year, as my income grew higher, I would
Mm-hmm.
go to the bank and ask for an increase. That's how I was able to sustain my staff for 6 months during the pandemic when everything was slow. I used my line of credit.
Oh, that's great advice.
So you gotta be smart about those things. Don't ask for a line of credit when you don't have money. So if you're at the
Right.
top and you know that you did well this year, go to the banks and do that.
That's great advice. I'm not there, not there yet because I'm only like barely a year in, but that's great advice for it because I do have a separate account, a high yield savings account that a percentage of what I make, also because taxes, because your company based in the US or the Philippines?
I have 2 companies. One
You
is
have two.
MGS Global here, and then
Okay.
I have another company in the Philippines. So, my company in the Philippines is a client of MGS Global, because
I see.
I need a company there because I'm giving everyone benefits, Social Security. So I run 2 companies.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
incredible. And how is your experience working setting up a business in the US versus in the Philippines?
Setting up a business in the US is so easy. You can set up a business
Yeah.
in like 2 hours. Just
Yeah.
do your LLC.
That is
In
true.
the Philippines, it's so long. Like
Really.
between the banks, it's a developing country. The systems are not in place, so it took like 6 months just to get everything, all the paperwork. You gotta get your names, make sure no one has the same name as it was long. But yeah, establishing a business in the US is way easier than the Philippines.
Interesting. That's interesting because yeah, so you're an LLC.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm an S corp, so I don't know if that was a little different.
it's an LLC acting as an S corp. It's an S
Oh,
corp,
okay.
but yeah, you
Oh,
can do
gotcha.
that. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha. And then one thing coming up is taxes. Do you have any advice on how to prepare for taxes besides having like I feel like that's what I'm also building is a nest egg because of taxes coming up. Have you seen a difference between the US and then I don't know how the tax system works in the Philippines?
It's the same. I mean, the Philippines is similar to the US. So I pay taxes there, I pay taxes here, but you should always have set aside. I know every quarter we have to pay estimated taxes, right?
Right.
Yeah, so do that to prepare for the taxes, cuz I mean, I have to pay for taxes coming up. It's a lot, but I'm saving. I'm
Right.
saving every month. Yeah.
No, that's it's and that's something business people also thinking about being a business owner. So if there's anybody listening, who's thinking about becoming a business owner, these are really great tips that I are talking about is having that nest egg, saving money, also putting yourself out there. What else would you share with someone who's thinking about starting their own business?
You need a good family support system, because you can't do it alone, right? I mean, for me, now I have like 40 employees. I could not have done the growth without, having these people around me. And if you really want to succeed as a business owner, you have to give away all of the hats that you're wearing. You can't wear all of the hats because you're never going to grow. I used to do drafting. It's
Wow.
funny because I'm a drafting company, but when I stopped drafting, the business grew, right? When
Really?
I personally stopped drafting, because if you're drafting, how else are you going to meet people, do business development,
Mhm.
networking events? I was way too busy doing project delivery. Because of that, the business kind of went down in 2016. I was busy with the day to day, right? So as a business owner, you have to really think about hiring as not an expense but as an investment. And a
Mhm.
lot of new business owners are very tight, right? Because cash flow is hard, but the more you release the funds and the money, your business will grow because it will free up your time to do other things. So I know it's very hard for a solopreneur to start hiring an assistant or like a bookkeeper, but it is necessary because if you haven't billed your clients in 6 months, that will cut into your cash flow, right?
No,
So yeah,
absolutely.
trust other people, transfer information, remove some of the hats that you're used to wearing yourself if you really want growth. So that has to change. You can't be transactional, whatever you see in your bank account that will, no, you have to provide for others so that they can give back to you as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
delegating is very important. I think that's one thing is certain bosses, even bosses who have multiple people under them, there's that micromanaging. And micromanaging is so detrimental. I was just talking to someone about that, about how, if you're micromanaging all of your employees and everybody, why hire employees if you don't trust them and delegate
true.
that work to them? That's why you have the team that you've created. And so I think you're so right about, spreading the work, especially delegating, especially in areas that you're not good at. So like we talked about, I have a podcast editor because that was one thing I wanted to start podcasting, but I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to learn how to podcast it. I just was like, this isn't, and it's not something that I wanted to do. I wanted to really connect with people. And this allows me to connect with guests, be able to do interviews. And then I have an incredible podcast editor who does the editing for me. And that allows the podcast to grow as well. I can't imagine not having her because without her, I probably would be on episode 10, not episode
Same
100 and
here,
something. Yeah. See, and you have a
right?
team too. And that's the important.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, you have your podcast manager, you have a team that's helping you because, like I've said on social media a lot of times, is it takes a village to have a company, to start a company, and to keep a company running. It can't be a one person show 24/7.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that I love about my work. I mean, I've put my dreams of being an architect aside, but at the same time, like I'm helping over 100 architects on a day-to-day basis, right? Helping them with project delivery and also maybe hopefully having a better work-life balance. Instead of drafting and doing all the CDs, I do all of that and then they can spend more time at home, right?
Mhm.
And then at the same time, I'm Filipino, I'm giving back to my employees, right? So now we have 40 people on staff. That's 40 families, right? With their health
Mhm.
insurance and things like that. So I've given my dream as being an architect has shifted to now serving architects. So at first I was always really guilty, like, oh man, I went to Columbia University. I don't have a license. I'm a failure, right? Every time I study, I'm like, oh, I get pulled into all of these things. But my operations manager said, why are you still wanting to be an architect when you're already serving all of the architects? You're good. Like, you don't also want to compete with your clients, right?
Very true. Very
But still,
true.
it's like there's a stigma that I never got that paper, but it's okay. I'll get
No,
over it.
and that's one amazing thing. Going back to what your dad said about architecture, is like architecture is an umbrella of you can do so much with an architecture degree. You don't have to necessarily be an architect with an architecture degree. You don't have to be designing buildings. And that's the incredible thing. It created this foundation for you, for your business, for you to be able to, you still love architecture. You're in the architecture community. You're still connecting with architects. You're able to design, if you wanted to design, you've kept that door open if you did want to get licensed, and now there's so many incredible study networks too. If you're with the AREs, that's a whole nother
I
challenging
know.
journey within itself. I did not have a good time with the AREs. And so I understand like that's also an intimidating thing, but it's not the end all be all. If you don't have
Exactly.
NCARB, it isn't
Yeah.
all. And you have created something, and I'm sure it's going to be inspiring to so many listeners, is even though you have an architecture degree, you don't have to be that licensed architect.
Yeah, and Mark LePage, he interviewed me in the podcast. He's like, "You are an architect, even though you don't have." I'm like, "Thanks, Mark." It's like anyone who went through architecture school, you're serving the community and da da da. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of getting over it. That was like 10 years ago when I was still like having issues that I never got that paper. But who knows, right? When I'm 60, I'll get that paper.
You could. You could.
Right.
No. And one thing I want to touch on too with you is you are a mother as well to
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
children, and having a company. and being a mother at the same time. That is something that it's in the future for me. Any advice?
Well, you're on the right track because you have freedom of time, right?
Right.
Imagine if you're an employee and you were a mother, you would feel so guilty about taking time off or leaving at 3 o'clock. The good thing about being an entrepreneur is that you have your own schedule. You have your, which is probably why you started. You know, you have
Yeah.
it's you're free. You have that freedom. In the beginning, you probably it's gonna be very rough. So make sure you have people around you. I don't know if you have family, you need to rely on that support, or
Mhm.
maybe start saving up so you can spend the first 3 or 4 months being at stay at home. For me, it was 3 or 4 months after being a stay at home mom. I'm like, oh my god, I can't do this. So when my it's like you're just talking to your 3 month old, right? You're like,
Right.
what am I doing with this thing? So that's when I started. You will know when it's time. That's when I started
Mhm.
getting drafting work at 3 or 4 months. You get the hang of it. So give yourself 3 to 4 months to get used to motherhood. That's the sweet spot before, but plan for it, right? Plan that you'll probably take 3 months off, and then save, and then start building and start looking for daycare or nannies that can come to your house to help you, because you can't watch your baby and work. It's not possible. I tried with my daughter, like, "It's okay, it's my" no, you're constantly breastfeeding or feeding or changing
Mm.
diapers. So, plan and save for it already, but it is possible to I mean, a lot of moms do it. So and I think, as an architect, we have the skills. We don't sleep, right?
Very true.
We're prepared.
Yes,
Yeah,
very
but have a
true.
good support system, like your spouse or your
Mhm.
friends, or like a mother's group. When I gave birth years ago, there was a mother's group in Jackson Heights for babies that were born within the first quarter of the year. So we had a group that really supported each other. So try looking for those groups
Mm.
also, because having the first child is very hard. The second, third, and fourth, and so on gets easier. But the
Mhm.
first one is kind of like a shock to your system. Like giving birth is the easy part, right?
Right.
People have like classes on how to give birth and the breathing, but the after the baby's out, like, what do you do?
To keep it alive.
Yes. Yeah, my parents were in the Philippines, so I didn't have support. My in-laws were in Cleveland, but we were in New York, right? So, but my sister came from Philly to help me for 2 weeks to really help me
Mhm.
manage. Yeah. So prepare financially, prepare for it, prepare that for the first 3 months or four, you probably will be at home and not working. But maybe who knows, you might be working. I don't know. If your
Mm.
baby sleeps through the night, then it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's again going back to thinking about what we were talking about as a business owner, that future, like the unknowns, what to plan for. And it seems like it's very similar. It's once you have this child, the baby, it's planning for something. So you sounds like it's very similar. Have the funds, delegate the work, find that team.
Yes.
So there's so
Yeah.
many similarities between running a company and having a child as
But I
far
also
as that.
want to share a story.
Okay.
I don't promote my business. I mean, when I say I don't promote, I don't sell. I'm not there like putting ads and stuff. I don't do that. But one time I was in hanging out in, I think, Women Architects Collective. No, no, Mothers in Architecture. And there was this
Okay.
lady, she posted, she's like, "Help, I don't know if I should quit my job. I'm giving birth to my fifth child
Oh my
and
gosh.
I'm the breadwinner of the family. What should I do?" And I'm like, fifth child, and she's the breadwinner because I think the husband was, I don't know what the husband did, but so I reached out and I said, you know what? When are you giving birth? She's
Yeah.
like, in 3 months. I'm like, can I help you? Like, we do architecture support. Don't give up your income. Don't tell your clients you're off because you're having. And then her kids are all
Mhm.
under 12 or under 10,
Oh my gosh.
and and so I reached out to her and I said, you know what? Before you do that, why don't you onboard our team? We'll give you a good rate. Just work with my team so that you'll have income, maybe for the next 3 months of your being a new mom again, then you'll have income. So we worked together for like a year. She never stopped. And then now she's back on track working. She has everything settled. But I reached out to that person on Facebook and I said, I'm not a big promoter or selling. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
to cold call, but I'm offering this to you because I don't want you to lose your income, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing, that setting up, your systems, like having an outsourcing company or a partner in your area who can mirror you or shadow you for now. So when you give birth,
Mm-hmm.
they can take over your jobs, right?
That's
So it
huge.
continues. Yeah. So find people there who are at the same level, who want to work with you part time, or even, a drafter, like what you're, so that it's continuous, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great advice. That's really great
Yeah.
advice. Well, Aya, thank you so much. This has been connecting with you and just talking with you. I feel like we are on the same page with so much. And I really admire your journey, having your company, the challenges you overcame with just not only the pandemic, but having two children and then having companies in two different countries on different sides of the world. That is incredible. And your podcast, I know it's just you also have so much going on and you do it with such class. And I think, like you said, you put yourself out there, and I think you do it so lovely.
Thank you, Katerina.
And where can listeners find you?
LinkedIn. I'm a big
Okay.
LinkedIn person. So Aya Schlachter. For my podcast, it's Instagram, Architect My Life podcast on Instagram, and my personal Instagram, Aya Schlachter.
Got it.
Oh, and
Perfect.
also my Facebook group, Architect My Life, Facebook group for women architects.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. As we conclude, I want to express my gratitude for joining me in today's episode. I hope you have found it insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and click that like button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share this with your friends. You can follow me on Instagram at From the Honeycomb Podcast, and you can also further your support of From the Honeycomb by visiting the Patreon link provided in the show notes. Your contribution helps make more episodes possible. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, A Spark of Positive Energy, that comes out on the 7th of each month. Thank you so much, and see you next Friday.